got audio. So that taken care of. How's everybody doing? If anybody out there is wondering why I wear my sunglasses at night, it's so I can watch you weave, then breathe your storylines. So I can keep track of the visions in my eyes. It's pretty deep. It's a classic song. Anyway, partly because I'm trying to preserve my eyes right now. Partly for effect. I mean, what can you say? It looks cool, right? But yeah, had a little excess screen time lately, and gotta chill on the eyes. So these screens are killing me. This thing is staring at the sun all day. So this little episode of the I'll try not to blow in the mic too often, but it's just kind of a recap of the last podcast. I had a little loose ends to tie up, I guess. I'm gonna hit the record button. Okay. Now I'm recording my desktop for the viewing audience. Oh man, these guys. First of all, let's look at Bitcoin again. Yeah. Seems like there's no stopping it, does there? Went all the way up to like 41,000. Yeah, I think it was at now what was it the last show? I'm really bad right now. Just gonna pull it up and look. So the last show, if you forgot, was about so last show it was sitting at 29,000. That was just a few days ago. Now it's 10,000 more. It was even higher, but it took a little minor correction. And that's expected. Why are we so interested in crypto, right? Like some little novelty, fake funny money, something kids are into. Well, here's the latest. The the new president, I guess. We're going to start saying that. Joe Biden, Dark Age Joe, I affectionately call him. Guess who he just elected as the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. Biden to pick blockchain scholar to head SEC regulator. An MIT blockchain scholar. I didn't even know that was a thing. Now it is, I guess. So you go look up, I'm fond of Wiki just for quickies. Little sound bites. You can always check, usually at least with Wiki, it has like some references on the bottom of the page. So, it's just not completely made up. But, so this guy, oh man, he's a character. Gary Gensler. He's been around a while. Isn't it interesting that all these little handlers just kind of cling administration after administration? So all the way back to Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and he's also an advisor to Hillary, I believe. And now, magically, he's back in office. I mean, in the White House administration. Oh, and guess what? He spent 18 years, if I can find it again, at Goldman Sachs, of course. Too big to fail banksters. Yeah, 1979. I mean, that's like a year after I was born, I think. I'm not sticking to that. Spent 18 years at Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs, man. Who's profiting right now? I just want to skip around a little bit. Check this out. Goldman Sachs and Rothschild, top financial advisors by value and volume in Europe in H1 2020. Thought it said H1 and N1 there for a second. So yeah, and then it goes through all this. Isn't that convenient that during all this crisis, these guys are just record-breaking profiting right now? It's kind of funny, isn't it, how that works? And yeah, there's the list of like the top of the top. Wasn't it Goldman Sachs recently? I want to look that up. That was hilarious. Goldman Sachs. Just say drug ship. Would that work? It was like tons of cocaine. Oh, JP Morgan. Yeah, same. It's up there. JP Morgan might lose drug ship. That's literally what popped up when I searched drug ship. U.S. Customs just seized a ship owned by JP Morgan. $1 billion in cocaine on that ship. And guess what? They didn't know no better. They can't keep tabs on what's on their ships. Yeah, okay, dude. So these are the guys making fortunes, making killings, literally, above the law in the drug trade. And in your wallet, evidently, because most people are using plastic these days and getting in debt and paying interest to these crooks. 39,525 pounds of cocaine on this border agents discovered on this containers. The MSC Guyane at the Philadelphia seaport. Oops. Busted.
The MSC Guyane was most recently in the Bahamas, Panama, Peru, and Colombia. Records show on Monday it pulled into the Philadelphia port with $1 billion of cocaine, an estimated 16.5 tons of illegal cargo. The U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania tweeted, "This is one of the largest drug seizures in United States history. This amount of cocaine could kill millions of people. My office is committed to keeping our borders secure and streets safe from deadly narcotics." Sources confirm the cocaine was located in several containers aboard the massive ship. Chopper 3 showed an intense law enforcement presence boarding the boat. A number of people making up the ship's crew have been taken into custody and charged in connection to the cocaine smuggling operation, according to federal prosecutors. The narcotics investigation brought shipping traffic to a standstill at the busy Packer Avenue terminal. It's expected law enforcement work here will go on for at least another day.
A seizure of a vessel this massive is complicated and unprecedented. Yeah, the circumstances are unprecedented, says the U.S. Attorney William McSwain. We found nearly 20 tons of cocaine hidden on this ship. Man, these guys are classic. Anyway, they'll probably get away with it scot-free, and I don't know why that other article said they might lose their ship. Bummer, dude. They're going to lose a ship. Yeah, that's a pretty good payoff, right? No jail time, nothing, but they might lose their little toy ship, which is like literally chump change to these guys. Know how I do, so I'm going back to this. Oh, there they are, JP Morgan, top 5. Is Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan related? I'm thinking they might be. Anyway, Rothschild, Goldman. These guys are making a killing right now. As usual. Anyway, that's just an initial context is what I'm trying to get out of that. Going back to this Gary Gensler guy. It doesn't look like he gets out much, but been a lot of administrations. So he's the head of the, let's look up, what's the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, right? All right. It's a large independent agency of the United States federal government. Is there such a thing as an independent agency in the United States federal government? I don't think so. That was created following the stock market crash of 1920s. Oh, that's a good thing. Yeah. Oops. Primary responsibility to enforce the federal securities laws, proposing securities rules, and regulating the securities industry, which is the nation's stock and options exchanges and other activities and organizations. I like that, just other. I mean, drug dealing too, they regulate that, including electronic security markets in the United States. General overview here. SEC has a 3-part mission: to protect investors, maintain fair, orderly, and efficient markets, and facilitate capital formation. Man, I wish I could just get some of that capital formated. I wish I could get some of that capital formed in my pocket, bank account, whatever. Anyway, that's being a smart aleck. Let's check this out. Russian lawmaker, Bitcoin is a CIA conspiracy. Is it now? I get a video I'm going to show shortly from Bitcoin Jesus, they call him. He was like one of the first big time promoters of Bitcoin. In fact, he jumped on Bitcoin.com, and he's still, I still see his tweets pop up. He's like Bitcoin on Twitter. Despite the fact that he created his own version, of course, like they all do, and called it Bitcoin Cash and tweaked the logo a little bit. But he was one of the original big time promoters. And, you know, he brings up this same accusation of the CIA conspiracy, the CIA meddling in cryptocurrency, because like I brought up on the last episode, why wouldn't they get involved, right? Why would the government, US government, not be involved in this technology from early on in its inception? Of course they would be. You don't just create a currency and get away with it in America, a competing currency to the dollar without getting completely shut down. There was a guy, he was minting his own gold coins in South Dakota, I think it was. Big trouble. He got in big trouble. Didn't take him long. So a lawmaker this was from 2015, it was a while ago. A lawmaker from the Liberal Democratic Party of Russia. That's funny. The Liberal Democratic Party of Russia is speaking out against Bitcoin and other digital currencies on the grounds that the technology is part of a U.S. plot to undermine the country's efforts internationally. They would never, be involved in espionage. The U.S. government? It wouldn't. No. They wouldn't do that. That was not me speaking right there. I did not say that. I'm just quoting. Just so we're clear. Are we clear? Are we clear? The comments made by MP Andrei Svintsov, I don't know how these guys pronounce their names, but came during remarks addressing the ongoing debate in Russia over whether Bitcoin and digital currencies should be banned as part of a broader effort to stop capital flight. See, because these pesky Ruskies, they know what's behind this technology. Like I brought up in the previous episode, it is designed to encourage people to bail out on their own currencies, their own paper sovereign currencies. And their currencies, in effect, hyperinflate, Bitcoin or, whatever said crypto, as long as it has that's what I didn't explain in the previous one. Maybe I'll cover it in this one. This artificial scarcity concept that only 21 million Bitcoins can be created, supposedly, even though, like people say, because it's completely arbitrary and made up, this artificial scarcity model. Yeah. They can always tweak the code if they really wanted to and make more, but it's indivisible on an almost infinite level, because you can have point 0.00, what is it? How many zeros? I can't remember now. 3, 4 zeros and a 1 Bitcoins. It's not even like a penny, but you can still own that much. So it's pretty diabolical is what it is. But speaking of, if you're wondering why my voice is so low right now, it's really late at night and I'm just trying to chill, This is how I this is like my version of a lullaby, bedtime story, studying up on this stuff. But let's make sure everything's still recording. Yes, it is. All right, cool. Nonetheless, Svintsov's remarks count as some of the more extreme to emanate from the discussion. All these cryptocurrencies, this is a quote, all these cryptocurrencies were created by U.S. intelligence agencies just to finance terrorism and revolutions. I have no doubt. In fact, I wonder, that was one of my questions, how many of these senators, lawmakers, Congress critters were or can be paid off, given bribes through Bitcoin, untraceable, or, some other more encrypted technology like Monero or something like that, that's even harder to track. It's dangerous, but that's the world we live in, right? Svintsov reportedly went on to explain how cryptocurrencies have started to become a payment method for consumer spending and cited reports that terrorist organizations are seeking to use the technology for illicit means. And I remember back in the day, when it was still one of those, it still had the status of like a decentralized technology. And that was one of the biggest accusations, like, this is going to be used to fund terror. But, we got our blockchain, what is he? Professor, MIT. So it's basically the foxes guarding the hen house right now. And again, Goldman Sachs, Rothschilds, they're all in on it. These are the top financial gods, basically, if you want to call them that, little g gods. And they've all been pushing for a cashless society for decades. And now we're getting it. Yeah. Blockchain scholar. Is that like, I guess that's a new class in MIT. Okay. In any case, and this guy, where was it in the article? They called him a bull because, it just said on Friday, this article was from, I'm confused, 1/13? Okay. 3 days ago. 3 days ago? That's it? Man. Seems like it was longer. I'm losing all track of time lately. Dreamland. Things just slowing down, speeding up, slowing down, speeding up. In any case, it hit on Friday. All-time high of $41,616. That's insane. Anyway, speculation. This is pure speculation. If like this Russian guy or this other guy I'm going to show you shortly, who is kind of on the inside, in the know, Roger Ver, that's his name, Bitcoin Jesus. If like these guys claim, and these are just a couple, there's more out there who've made this connection. Let me get rid of this. This is really bad. I don't want to have this on my computer. Okay. If they claim, like I said, that early in the founding of Bitcoin, they approached the CIA and disclosed their technology, presented it to them. Let's just assume that theory is true. So then the US, or at least the black op, the counterfeit, what do you want to call them? I don't know. Counterfeit black agencies that are running the government, basically. Let's just assume that they have ownership of, and by ownership, it means that you own. Think of the more you own of Bitcoin. I think it was a Satoshi, this fake name. Let me look that up. How much Bitcoin does Satoshi have? That's one big mystery. It's like, why doesn't this guy cash in on some of that Bitcoin just sitting there? Wow. So he has this just pops up in the top of Google, but This is what I've heard in the past. He has 1 million Bitcoins, and I think he's got a little more than that. And these, okay, so the Satoshis are the smallest increment of a Bitcoin. Don't ask me how that works out right now because it's too late. But so if you have a large, think of it like a market share in this imaginary, whatever, company or product, then you can, in theory, control it. You know, the ups and downs, what direction it takes, or you could one day, which is a possibility, you could one day just pull the plug and, you know, leave everybody with empty bags, but which it's already empty because it's not even real. But man, yeah. So according to this, the creator mined 10.5 billion in today's money, and that was a while ago. So it's probably like twice that right now, 20-30 billion. I like this. That's good. It's a good depiction of Satoshi, an empty mask, because he's not a person. There was one guy who, according to, you know, my opinion, just from what I've studied and whatever, I think he fits the mold better than anybody else as Satoshi. And that was literally his name. It was like, you know how people want to make everything all like secretive and wear dark glasses at night and make things bigger than they are. I think literally he might have just used his real name online, and you know, he's maybe naive in thinking that this little invention or this idea might have not blown up the way it did, and he wouldn't be under such a critical lens like he was later in every email that he ever sent. Anyway, there's an interview, and I'll try to find it, stick it up, with this guy with the literal name, and he lived in California, and he had these interesting ties. And yeah, he made this comment that yeah, I no longer have anything to do with that. The first time he was interviewed, and then he just remained silent from there on out. And it's like, okay. And he later claimed he didn't mean what he said. It's like, yeah, right. So, and this was after, according to Roger Ver and others, this was after their meeting with the CIA, and he just backed away from that. They never heard from him again, and they never got emails. These different people that he had working on the project, these different computer coders and stuff. I keep hitting my glasses, don't I? It's the real glass. So that's a good depiction of Satoshi. Yeah, 1,125,000 at least. Anyway, where am I? That was just, I mean, back then it was so easy to mine a Bitcoin. You could literally make the equivalent of millions on your laptop just letting your laptop run. That's how insane this thing exploded. Anyway, and now you need like mega factories full of the highest end. That's one thing it has, the result of this technology is this demand for processing power. And so I got a friend investing in the stock market a little while back, and I'm like, you might want to invest in NVIDIA because they're one of the main graphics. I'm just curious. Processors. Ooh, took a little dive, but yeah, the hardware that is used to mine this stuff is they're up and down. 6 months, not too bad, but I have a feeling, 5 years. 1 year, yeah, it's been up, up, up. Yeah, easily double your money. And during that COVID crash, everything took a dip. But look at, wow, that's crazy. I'm pointing at the bottom of the crash. So this was before COVID. This is after. It's obviously just increased in value. Because we're just living in this insane world where there's such a disconnect with like boots on the ground, real people's lives and livelihoods, and the working class, our ability to like feed ourselves and keep a job right now. And Wall Street, stock market, that COVID doesn't exist according to the stock market. And that's my my hypothesis. It's a big word. If, according to this video I'm going to show you shortly, if Bitcoin is owned by these black op agencies that rule our government, along with the Fed, which is another counterfeit branch of the government, the Federal Reserve, the unaudible Federal Reserve. You can't audit it. You can't look into what they actually do because they're above the law. And the one congressman that tried, time and time again, Ron Paul, he just got blocked every step of the way, didn't he? And ever since he left office, it's just kind of, we don't think about that anymore. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. And that's the Fed. That's the man who prints the money. But right now there's a massive, they're just cranking up the money machines, even though they're all digits for the most part. What if, the same people, CIA, whatever, who run the black op agencies like the CIA, who controls now, let's just assume, the fate of Bitcoin. The same people, the same characters are behind the Fed and their plans for our futures. And they only have the best in mind for us, right? Oh, what if they're taking our tax money right now and propping up Bitcoin? There's no way I can prove that. Okay, that was weird. Hold on a second. The Matrix, man. It's always the Matrix cutting through. I think they're trying to cut off my transmissions right now as we speak. But what if they were propping up Bitcoin for their broader agenda? What if it was like time to pull the plug right now on the US dollar and issue in this, as we discussed on the other show, this world currency? Just a speculation. Because, the rise of Bitcoin right now is just insane. And here's another thought. What if they tell all their little cronies, their fellow globalists, Rothschilds, Goldman Sachs, in the Vatican, and their little business leaders who want this new economy, this new fair global capitalistic. You can still call it capitalism if it's not even capitalism. What if they're all in on it, and that's why there's all these big financial agencies right now flooding it with capital. Just a thought. But yeah, this is the insane rise, Of course, I was down here watching it. And I think right about here around 6,000-7,000, I'm like, you know what? I bet you that was the bottom right there because it recoiled so fast, it spiked back up. And that's how you can tell sometimes. It's like, okay. All those guys that just pumped it back up knew what they were doing, didn't they? And they're just making mad profits all the way up because they know where the bottom's at. But we're just guessing. Yeah, this insane. I was over here before, when I was all stressed out on Bitcoin. Now it looks like this little molehill. There's the mountain. Anyway, yeah, I don't think I have the temperament for being a day trader, definitely. And I don't really have the money to sit on a pipe dream. So yeah, I'm gonna watch this video. It's already recorded it, and I know the timestamp. Let me do a real quick Roger Ver, so we know who we're listening to. And make of it what you will. Could be his little conspiracy theory, but like I say, he's not the only one that's made this connection. And just points out the obvious that, the central intelligence agencies and these different agencies of the government are not just going to let random technologies develop and threaten the dollar. Okay? It's not going to happen. So, has been known as Bitcoin Jesus for his promotion of Bitcoin. Now promotes Bitcoin Cash. And he claims his whole spiel is that it's like the original his little version follows the original conception or whatever, this ideal that Bitcoin was based off of. I don't know. I don't trust any of these guys. They're making a fortune off of their little funny monies, and of course they're going to be devotees of their own, wealth generating whatever devices. I don't know. Wow. Okay. So yeah. Yeah, I just donated $1 million to the Foundation of Economic Education. Whatever that is. Anyway, who is this guy? Right? That's right. In 2002, Ver pleaded guilty to selling explosives without a license, illegally storing explosives, and mailing explosives. I don't know if that was just a setup or what. I can't remember the story behind that. Firecrackers on eBay. Oh my gosh. That was in 2002. That was before he was even involved in Bitcoin. So that's one of those stupid things. He's one of the 5 founders of the Bitcoin Foundation. Yeah, he wants Bitcoin to rival major fiat currencies. That was back 2012. That's when like I said earlier, it was 2008. I think it was more like 2012, but it was still ridiculous. Like $10 or something for a Bitcoin when I first heard of it. And interestingly enough, it was at a campaign fundraiser dinner with Ron Paul, of all people. First time I got to meet the man up close and shake his hand. He's got like severe arthritis in his hands. I didn't realize. They're just all bent up. That guy's a workhorse, man. But somewhere on some hard drive, I got a picture of him. Make it a peace sign with me. I was a hippie. I had long hair back then. Not a real hippie, but you know what I mean. I really grasped onto his non-intervention foreign policy and just end the wars. I mean, how many times do we got to go to war? We're never happy enough, are we? Until we're just bombing people every other decade. Anyway, so there's a person who was one of the campaigners who brought it up and said, man, this is the future. And I never thought about it again until another few years, probably 10 years down the road, when I heard from my cousin that was really into it. And now he's probably a multi-millionaire. Anyway. Not at all bitter about that. So that's Roger Ver. Libertarian. Ran a California State Assembly as a candidate for Libertarian Party. Interesting. Yeah, that was one of the things, like the sell to libertarians I never could get. Because from what I get from like true libertarians like Ron Paul, they're all about gold-backed standards, and this is backed by nothing, and it's not even private, which I'll get into later. It's a great way to, there's, in fact, like, where was he? There's this article. Bitcoin is manipulated by the CIA, claims Bitcoin.com founder. It would be naive to think the CIA has not been involved in disrupting cryptocurrencies. And so we'll watch the video and then I'll get on with it. I'm going to play. It's getting late, right? So, keep in mind he's got his own agendas, of course, and he wants to get everybody on his own cryptocurrency. But I think, there might be some truth to what he says. It's my speculation, but it's not pure speculation. It's backed up by several other data points, let's just say. So I'll go to... This is just another podcast. He said this on several occasions, actually. And 17-minute mark, I think.
Well, what do you think? Were you going to say something there?
I was going to add a little bit more to the censorship, though, too.
Sure.
So, like, when you look at the ways governments around the world love to control the press, and for people that don't know, like Google Project Mockingbird, right? Like this came out a couple of decades ago. The U.S. government had been intentionally trying to get CIA agents in all the major media sources in the U.S. so they could shape and mold and influence public opinion. And I think that got started in like the 1950s or something. And so if they've been doing it since then, just about normal media, normal news, don't think for a second that they wouldn't be looking to influence cryptocurrencies, because cryptocurrency can have a huge impact on the way all of society works. Mm-hmm. And I know firsthand, because I saw it with my very own eyes, social media manipulation was already in place and ready to be turned on at this flip of a switch in June of 2011.
Wow.
And so for those, most people weren't in Bitcoin at that point, but I was day in and day out. I'd already been involved, maybe 5 months at that point. And that was the first time there was, like, everybody remembers the bubble when Bitcoin hit $20,000, or most people remember, because it was, kind of worldwide attention at that point. But in 2011, there was a similar, what felt like, a huge bubble that everybody was so excited about. And the course of 2 weeks, Bitcoin went from around $2 to $30, right? So more than a 10x increase in just a couple of weeks. And everybody that was already in Bitcoin was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Bitcoin went from $2 to $30. And everybody was excited and wanted to talk about it within the community. But at that time, the main discussion platform wasn't Reddit. It was this website called bitcointalk.org. And when Bitcoin was getting some media attention from around the world and people were interested in it, the forums got flooded with a bunch of posts from new accounts that nobody knew that were just saying fluff, like buy, sell, oh no, look at this. And just non-fluff comments that had zero substance whatsoever. And there were so many of those fluff comments that flooded the forum that the forum became unusable for all of us that actually wanted to discuss Bitcoin at that time. So I even saw in June of 2011, they effectively turned off people's ability to be able to discuss Bitcoin at one of the times in which people most wanted to be able to discuss Bitcoin. So the social media manipulation, whether it's coming from the deep state or wherever it's coming from, has been going on since at least June 2011. And we know that at the end of 2010, the CIA specifically contacted the developers on Bitcoin and said, hey, we are interested in this. Can you come and meet with us and explain this to us? So the fact that the CIA was already looking at it in 2010 means that by 2011, of course, they were ready with their social media manipulation. And when you look at the way Bitcoin has been diverted from peer-to-peer cash to the world, to it's supposed to be a digital gold commodity, just like the IRS ruled and wanted. How does that disrupt the powers that be? How does that disenfranchise the government's ability from being able to control people? It doesn't really do much of anything to make the world a better place. Whereas if you have peer-to-peer electronic cash for the world, that benefits the entire world, but at the detriment of government control. So I think you're naive to think that they haven't been trying to subvert peer-to-peer cash being brought to the world.
It doesn't surprise me, but I did not know it went back that early. They really caught on pretty quick, didn't they?
Yeah, well, I guess, governments are good at controlling the populace, because if they really figured out that all government is it takes a bunch of money from the people, that keeps a bunch of it for themselves and for their friends, and then gives part, and they take that money really quietly in the form of, income taxes and inflation. And then they keep a bunch of it for themselves, and then they give it back really loudly, and they have big celebrations and ribbon cutting ceremonies. And look at how we're giving you back, 10 cents on the dollar of the money that we took for you. Or Social Security, they make this big deal. Look, we're giving you all this money. Don't look at the money we've taken from you for the last 40 years, but look, we're sending you a check for $1,000 a month. And so that's what governments do. And they have to keep the people, under control. And the best way they can do that is through, controlling the media. And if everybody says, oh, Social Security is wonderful, don't ever possibly do the math for yourself and see that if you probably put the money under your mattress and collect 0% interest, you'd still probably come out ahead on there. And there's lots of great videos on YouTube with people doing the math. But that's why they have this big giant propaganda machine out there. And if Social Security was such a great deal, they could just make it voluntary. They wouldn't have to force people into it. But they force people into it, and then they help, pacify people to not complain about it too much with all this social media, propaganda, funded by the taxes that they're taking from you too.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, but it's unfortunate that Bitcoin, as defined in the white paper, it is a big threat to the banks and to the establishment, and that's its design. So it's not a surprise.
The biggest threat ever, right? Ever.
Yeah.
What could have been bigger?
Yeah, money rules the world. Money is like half of every transaction. It's the grease that greases society's wheels.
Get away with it.
And so, yeah, I could see why it could be a threat.
Okay. That's good. That's enough. Enough of that. I've heard of this guy too. Gavin Engines. It's too late. Gavin Andreessen gave a talk on Bitcoin at the CIA headquarters. Let me pull that up. Five years ago. This article was from 5 years ago. Okay, so that puts it around, cannot count right now, probably 2006. No. 2016. So 2011, they admit that this Anderson guy, let me look him up real quick, because I've heard his name before. Another big time promoter. Software developer. Yeah. Oh yeah, what's his net worth? I'm sure it's quite a pretty penny, this guy. Because he was like early on, alongside Satoshi, whoever that is, mining Bitcoin. So I'm sure he's more than $2 million. Anyway, yeah, that's the info for the cattle. That's what that's called. But he was a lead developer for a part of Bitcoin digital currency project. Working to create a secure, stable cash for the internet. For some reason they need that, right? Credit cards don't work good enough. He went on to become the lead developer. Yeah, so yeah, there's been all these guys like Craig Wright, who makes Bitcoin SV, Satoshi Vision, whatever. All these people pop up that claim to be Satoshi, but they have no proof. So, and they're all trying to make money. So, they're all trying to prop up their little fake coins. I'm the real guy. So according to this article, from News BTC, at least, admittedly, this guy, the head developer, met with the CIA 5 years ago, which would have been 2011, according to this time frame, I believe. So yeah, head developer met with the CIA at the CIA headquarters. Nothing has come from that connection ever since. And according to the story, how the story goes, this Satoshi guy, the main guy that came up with the idea, vanished after that initial meeting with the CIA headquarters because, they're probably like, you know what, if you want to live out the rest of your life and the rest of your family, and they might have given him a little payoff, let us just take care of that for you. But so yeah, according to the Roger Ver guy, he says that their involvement centers around trying to take it down or destabilize it. No, what if it's the other way around? What if their involvement is to destroy the dollar and to take basically all the countries of the world to their knees while they completely consolidate and monopolize power? These few that are in on the game, like the Rothschilds, the Vatican, the big banksters, the elites who want to rule and control the world. And they don't want to share their wealth, right? They want us to be basically Dark Age peasants. And they're our kings ruling over us with uber technology. Good luck resisting, right? So that's just a little, I know I've already drawn on longer than I probably should have, but it's just a little taste for, there's a lot of these articles, and they say, a lot of them say, no, Bitcoin was not created by the CIA. I'm not even saying that. But you know how they do. they co-opt technologies and use them for their own agendas, for their own aims. You know, if it's a threat to the establishment, the establishment is not just going to wink their eye and look the other way, you know? Anyway, it's pretty common sense, but... And you can look up this Satoshi guy, Nakamoto. And show a video of him real quick. Who I think he is, anyway. Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto. Yeah. This guy's got, okay. Japanese American living in California. His birth name is Satoshi Nakamoto. Right? Like, what are the odds, right? And besides his name, Goodman pointed to this was Leah McGrath Goodman identified Dorian Prentice Satoshi Nakamoto. She was a journalist who investigated during an article 2014 Newsweek. You know, completely covered up now. Never existed, right? But she invested this guy, and Goodman pointed to a number of facts that circumstantially suggested that he was the Bitcoin inventor. Trained as a physicist at Cal Poly University in Pomona, California. So this guy's pretty intelligent. Nakamoto worked as a systems engineer on classified defense projects and computer engineer for technology and financial information services companies. Wow, what a coinkydink. Nakamoto was laid off twice in the early 1990s and turned libertarian, according to his daughter, which is, you know, again, one of the main interest groups. Is that the way to say it? But one of the main core followers in the early days with libertarians. According to his daughter, and encouraged her to start her own business, not under the government's thumb. In the article, seemingly biggest piece of evidence, Goodman wrote that when she asked him about Bitcoin during a brief in-person interview, Nakamoto seemed to confirm his identity as the Bitcoin founder by stating, quote, "I am no longer involved in that. I cannot discuss it." That's the interesting. I cannot discuss it. It's been turned over to other people. They are in charge of it now. I no longer have any connection. What does that sound like to you? Just leave that little breadcrumb with you. Yeah, it sure sounds like, and that came literally, like I said, he stepped down from the project right after the meeting at the Central Intelligence Agency's headquarters. So, yeah. And then the media harassed the guy, surrounded his house, chasing him by a car when he drove to do an interview. And of course, they had another subsequent full-length interview where he denied all connection to Bitcoin. Because he probably had a gag order, and you know, the sneaky little CIA, as they are, they don't want to be revealed as behind all this subversive, destructive technology. Because there's a bigger agenda behind all this stuff. I mean, beyond what meets the eye. denied all connection to Bitcoin, saying he had never heard of the currency before. I know nothing about Bitcoin. It's a bad accent, but yeah. And that he had misinterpreted Goodman's question as being about his previous work for military contractors, much of which was classified. I'm sure it was. In a Reddit Ask Me Anything interview, he claimed he had misinterpreted Goodman's question as being related to his work at Citibank, so now his story changes. Later that day, the pseudonymous, I'm going to leave it at that, Nakamoto's P2P Foundation account posted its first message in 5 years stating, "I am not Dorian Nakamoto." In September, the account posted another message saying it had been hacked, raising questions over the earlier message authenticity. Anyway, and there's other people that'll go through, Craig Wright and all these other guys, but that guy, I mean, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to see that guy as probably one of the instrumental persons behind this invention. Anyway, that's that. I'll leave you with that interview with Nakamoto if I can find it here. And thanks for watching. We'll cover more later. It is almost 3 a.m. right now, so I need to call it sign out. Thanks for watching. Appreciate all the support. God bless. We'll see you.
Welcome back, everyone. It has been one of the biggest mysteries raging across the internet and business worlds. Who is Satoshi Nakamoto? The man who created Bitcoin is known as the father of Bitcoin, the online currency now worth billions. Take a look at this scene last night after Newsweek published an article claiming the man in these images is the Bitcoin founder. Hordes of reporters chasing him, chasing the man who may just be Nakamoto in front of his Los Angeles home. So is it him? The reporter who first found this man is joining us now live. Leah McGrath-Goodman, a senior writer at Newsweek and the reporter who investigated this piece in Newsweek, the face behind Bitcoin. Leah, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So this was a 2-month investigation that you did, right?
Yeah, it was 2 months of almost obsessive sifting through information.
And I want to get to how you found this man. But first, when you see the scenes, when you see the video outside of this man's home, it's caused quite a stir. Why do you think this is Satoshi Nakamoto?
Obviously, it's not what I wanted to see. People mobbing this man. That was unfortunate, I think. But the reason we think it's him is we went through, I don't know how many leads, and the process of this research isn't about proving who someone might be. It's about eliminating possibility. So for every person, you say, why might it not be them? And with this man, we could never find how it might not be him. So when I interviewed him, it was, are you not this man? And he made it clear to me, he acknowledged Bitcoin and said, I am no longer involved in it, I'm no longer connected with it, and other people are in charge of it now, but I don't want to talk about it.
So all roads kind of led to this door, to this conversation that you had with him.
Yes.
Since then, after the piece was released, you've had these scenes outside his home and other reporters trying to speak with him. Both the Associated Press and the LA Times, they confronted him. And in part, when he's spoken to them, he said that he was never involved. And he also said that that conversation that you had with him was misunderstood. Does his denial after the fact to these reporters, he said, it's not me, I'm not that man. Does that change anything for you?
Well, of course, I'm interested in what he had to say to them. And I talked to a number of the people who were on site yesterday, including, I think, a couple of the key people. And what they told me was the way he represented our conversation was so far different from what happened that made me think he wasn't trying to be truthful at that point. I guess if he had said something about maybe I just misunderstood, although I'm certain he didn't.
So you're certain your conversation happened the way it is. You did not misunderstand.
But he took it to another level. He said he thought I was talking about Quotron, which a journalist showed him an article in which I said he had worked at Quotron, and he said, oh, yes, that's what I thought she meant. And I thought that that was very not true to the conversation he and I had. I think he knows that as well.
So then take me back just very briefly.
Yeah.
How did did an exhaustive search of databases and records, but what was it that it finally connected you with him? How did you find him?
Well, I mean, his address is posted, so once we saw the name that he's using now, it's easy enough to find where he is.
So would you say he was hiding in plain sight?
I would say he was hiding in plain sight, absolutely.
I just realized that I did not completely, within my standard of journalism. I'm not a journalist, but show me the evidence. That's how I think. So I'm going to expound on this guy a little bit more. Okay, so Gavin Andresen, like Mr. Anderson, but Andresen, Chief Scientist, Bitcoin Foundation. So here he is. According to this article, Gavin Andresen is an American computer scientist and software developer, best known for his early contributions to Bitcoin. Andresen took up the role of lead developer of Bitcoin Core after Satoshi Nakamoto disappeared in 2010. Andresen also acted as chief scientist for Bitcoin Foundation after it was formed in 2012. Man, that was early. That was when I first heard of it. Oh, those are the good old days, weren't they? When anybody could become a millionaire. Anybody. You could win the lottery, just throw in a couple dollars. So he graduated from Princeton in 1988, of course, right? And worked as a software developer discovering Bitcoin in 2010. Okay, so met Nakamoto over email. 2010, created the Bitcoin Faucet, a website which gave out free Bitcoin to help attract users to the project. That'd been nice, right? Free Bitcoin. Later, he announced that he would undertake more active project management for Bitcoin with Nakamoto's blessing. He became lead developer of Bitcoin Core. And then Nakamoto disappeared, and so they openly admit in April 2011, the CIA offered Andresen $3,000 to give a presentation on Bitcoin at the Emerging Technologies Conference for the U.S. intelligence community held in CIA headquarters.
From there, you end up writing one of the early pieces on Bitcoin, like you mentioned. And at this point, you're at Newsweek. Tell us a little bit about that story and kind of the search for Satoshi.
Yeah, so when Newsweek relaunched, and I was I think one of the first writers they hired, and I grew up reading Newsweek and loved it, so I was extremely game to help with the relaunch. We had already been writing a lot of articles online, but this was the big relaunch in print. And one of my editors, I've never told this story, but one of my editors sent me an email. He was a playful British guy, still a wonderful dear friend and one of my favorite editors. He was a real hard ass, he didn't give you an inch, but once you proved yourself, he was great. And he sent me a note and said, I've been looking at this Bitcoin, and this was around 2013. He sent me a note. He said, I've been looking at this Bitcoin, and would you look into these Bitcoin women? And I wrote back and said, Bitcoin women? And he wrote, well, I don't know, but that Bitcoin is trouble, and wherever there's trouble, there's women. Yeah, there's a lot of sexist jokes in the newsroom. It's just part of life. So I said, oh yeah, let me go check it out. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized this is phenomenal. And how would somebody even begin to create a code that could act as currency and somehow get the rest of the world to actually exchange cash for it? Imagine yourself going into a room with your smartest friends and saying, hey, how about y'all give me some cash for this code that I'm writing? They'd laugh you out of the room, even if you were brilliant, right? So my big question was, how did it really get off the ground? Who was behind it? There seemed to be some people who knew more things than others, and it was not a bad thing that Gavin Andresen, who was the chief scientist at the time, he lived just a couple towns over from my home in Vermont, so it was easy to pop over there and just try to get a lay of the land from him to start with, and really I just wanted to talk to. It was early days. It still hadn't exploded yet. And you could still go and talk to like the top 10 people who had emailed with Satoshi, right? Who had talked to him a lot and had very strong opinions on who this person was. And my first thought was, let's create a profile based on what all these people say and agree on, and then take it from there to see what we can find in the world that fits what they directly experienced.
Yeah. And I think that, still to this day, people ask the question, who is it? Right. And there's some people who believe it's better off that nobody knows. And there's other people who believe, it would be awesome to figure it out. And in the story, obviously Dorian Nakamoto, who I've met, and we've hung out at a conference, and couldn't be a sweeter guy, is now become kind of I don't want to say a staple of the crypto community, but he is definitely present quite often, which is cool to see him kind of attending events and things like that as well.
So what did Dorian say to you when you talked to him? I'm interested. I'm not trying to interview you, but
yeah. So I actually don't remember kind of the initial conversation. It's one of these things where like you don't remember exactly what people say. You just remember kind of how you felt in the initial moments. And when we saw each other, we both kind of like lit up and went over to each other. We were talking, and I think he was probably just as surprised that I recognized him as I was that he recognized me. And so it was kind of this weird, like, oh, okay. And it was in LA at the Bitcoin 2020 conference, San Francisco. And we were hanging out, and he just was like happy to be there. And like, you could tell he was excited about kind of all of the energy and everything that was going on. Right. And people were coming up to him and talking to him and all this kind of stuff. And I think that was like my biggest takeaway, was just happy. Like, he was very happy as a person, which, is somewhat rare in today's world. So when you see somebody like that, I think you kind of remember it.
Yeah. He's an incredibly, his whole family who I interviewed, very, very brilliant guy. And he's not some old guy. He's not a random old guy. He's very brilliant. And he's into it. Obviously, he's quite enthusiastic even today. I think that even though I haven't been able to talk to him directly, obviously in the aftermath of the story, it was clear we wanted to do a follow-up interview so we could also square what he had said to us with what he was saying later, and not to get ahead of ourselves, but I really, really wanted to be able to connect with him, but it was clear that wasn't something he would want to do. And, you can force situations as journalists. You can just show up and keep trying. You have to walk away if they say no. But I just felt like, considering what everyone had been through in 2014 with that story, it just seemed better to wait, or, to wait, or at least for the moment, to let things go and let him settle after everything. I definitely didn't expect the level that went to on the day it was published.
Well, and so, for everyone listening, Leah and I talked before, and like, this is all still, I think, very sensitive, because there's just so many people involved in the story, and everyone's got kind of their own perspectives and opinions. So maybe from your perspective, because it's impossible for you to kind of talk to other people's perspective, just kind of talk a little bit about like the quote unquote aftermath, right? So you publish this story, it's a cover story, and then, all hell breaks loose, basically, good and, maybe not so good, but kind of what was your perspective, and kind of how do you view it today?
I think, and I should talk a little bit about the lead up, because that was important as well. Lead up and aftermath. In the lead up, we were really just looking to get the best profile possible, and then look at every single candidate Several things that the people I interviewed told me, including Gavin, but a lot of others who had corresponded with Satoshi and worked on the code, had said things like, gave timelines, things like the code took about 2 years to write, according to Satoshi. There were consistent messages that came from everyone. And you could look at someone's resume and see, I remember Nick Szabo was a very prominent candidate for a lot of people. And but he clearly wasn't free to do what it was that those who spoke with Satoshi said had to be done to create the code. His itinerary did not match at all, like a very busy person, and didn't match this whole spending 2 years very quietly working on this thing. And Gavin and the others had said it was really clear that the code might have been supplemented by some people, but was really clearly coming mainly from one individual. And so a lot of the early pieces of information, and then certain things like, I don't know if you guys all know this, but there was a crashed file when they were test driving Bitcoin before the official launch, and they were just trying to get it going. There was a crashed file with Hal Finney that had, at one point Satoshi had written to Hal and said, send me the data so I can figure out what went wrong. And he was supposed to send it privately to Satoshi, but instead Hal posted it publicly on a forum so everyone could look at it. And that had an IP address in it that led us to the same neighborhood Dorian lives in LA. And so there were certain hard pieces of evidence that led us repeatedly to Dorian, but it wasn't something where one could say before interviewing him, oh, well, that's open and shut. We don't even need to talk to him. Of course I had to go talk to him. And there were weeks of us exchanging emails. And I even sent him a letter with a bit card in it, that Gavin had given me. And so when I did interview him, he had already received all this and knew that what we were talking about was Bitcoin. So I think one of the things that was most disappointing to me was in the aftermath of saying, he didn't know that that's what we were talking about. He definitely knew that we were talking about it. We had been talking about it for weeks before I actually physically visited him. But he really didn't want to talk about it. He really didn't want to discuss it. And I suspect if there hadn't been two other people there kind of pressuring him to talk when I was doing the interview in person, that he may not have said anything. But by the time the story was published, we had interviewed the whole family. We had interviewed a lot of people surrounding him. We'd interviewed him. And we'd also double and triple checked that interview and talked to his brothers. And, so by the time it came out, I couldn't have checked anything more deeply than I had. I pretty much obsessively checked everything. That being said, I expected a reaction because, as you noted, lots of people don't want to know who it is. They consider it inappropriate. There's all those reasons. So you're only even going to be interested in this if you already want to know. If you don't want to know, you're not even going to be interested in this story. When it was published, I was ready for a lot of screaming over, we shouldn't talk about who this is. What I was not ready for was people saying that a concrete interview with witnesses never really happened or didn't really happen the way that was reported. When you've worked for 20 years in interviews and no one's ever said anything like that before, it really takes you by surprise. So that day, the storming of Dorian's lawn and the people camping out and, just the haranguing and, that was horrible to watch as a journalist. It's the opposite of what you want. You do not want to see that happen. And I have very wealthy hedge fund managers who are scared when just one person comes to their house and protests with a sign, somebody was telling me the other day, Daniel Loeb had someone outside screaming about inequality. And he was like, oh, it's so upsetting. They're coming to our houses. And I can't imagine what that was like for him. It was certainly horrible to watch for me. So I can only imagine what it was like for him to experience. And then, of course, everyone's outraged about that. So, it was almost like this cascading set of events that were in motion that none of us could stop at that point.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is so interesting as I've talked to you about kind of the story and the process and then obviously the kind of aftermath is I don't think a lot of people understand the work that you did before the article was actually published, right? So in terms of talking to the family and like you said, kind of double and triple checking. And then on top of that, obviously there's people at Newsweek who are looking at this. When you kind of look back at that process, what do you remember kind of the family's reactions or family and friends as you were talking about before the story came out? Was this something that was like oh yeah, of course, that's possible? Or were people kind of completely oblivious and didn't even understand, kind of Bitcoin or anything about it?
So Dorian's the oldest of three brothers. And he changed his name from Satoshi Nakamoto to Dorian Prentice Satoshi Nakamoto in 1973 when he became a naturalized citizen. And he and his brothers are all very bright. His brother Arthur, they both work for Hughes Aircraft doing classified work. There was quite a background. His brother had a pipe bomb planted in his car, and obviously very terrifying when he worked for Hughes. And as a result, the family felt really uneasy about any sort of public stuff, especially after, what happened when Arthur had that happen to him was, a pretty big, probe into, well, did he do it? Did someone else do it? I guess it was in the professional parking garage where he was working. So there was already this feeling of, we don't really want to expose ourselves to things. This horrible thing had happened. And I remember Dorian's former wife telling me that it was just really devastating and scary. And, who would want to put a bomb, in his car? And I think they were very surprised when people tried to look into him, like he might have put it there himself. It was upsetting, to say the least. And so, there was kind of a family feeling of not wanting to expose themselves anyway to any kinds of deeper inquiries. But Dorian himself was very private. When he first started emailing me back, his emails didn't have his name on it. His email said Mountain Spring. That was it. That was his name. And I thought, for a guy who is, of a certain age, a programmer, but someone who's also been a teacher and has done a lot of other things, I just didn't expect that. I might expect that from a millennial, but Mountain Spring from a senior citizen was quite surprising. So his family had talked about him as very private, that he was always working on things but didn't really share, and that they did think that he could have been involved, but that he wouldn't confirm it. They all did talk to him. To this day, family members have come to me saying that they think that he did, that he was certainly working on it, but that they can't get him to open up about it. So it's really one of those strange family things. I don't know if you've ever talked to families at length, especially in my case as a journalist. You end up hearing about all the things, and then you're like, okay, almost none of this is reportable and it's not relevant, but I do want to give a fair understanding of who this person is and what they're like. And I think the person you see at the conferences is a very different kind of person than that they experience. But that doesn't mean those two people aren't real, right? A lot of us, we're all complex and hopefully somewhat integrated. So that was their response. It was kind of painful too for some of them. Before the story came out, I had to contact everyone to close down their Facebook accounts or to remove anything that was going to be publicly not stuff that they would want to share with the world. There were a couple things one of the kids had put on his Facebook page I thought might make him feel vulnerable if everybody was reading it the next day. So we talked about that. And there was a whole process of let's clear out anything that's going to make you feel harmed. And so there was a preparation before the story was released. And, you do what you can as a journalist. We also didn't want to affect the Bitcoin price. You have to try to create the most neutral footprint you can. And that was important. In fact, when I reread the story, I'm somewhat surprised these days of how kind of simple it is. There was so much detail we didn't put in because Bitcoin was such a weird thing to even explain to people. So we're just trying to make it as easy to understand as possible. the problems that arose with the story and the protests were so different than what I had anticipated. You know, questions about certain parts of the interviews. And if I'd known, right, I probably would have written it very differently.
It's so fascinating too, because it sounds like you were, had done the work, and you were very cognizant of the fact that, like, look, there could be, some interest in this, and spending a lot of time with the family.
Yeah.
I don't know how many journalists think that they're going to basically get scrutinized by, millions of people on the internet for their interviews and the way that they wrote their story. And like, let's say, I think not exactly the thing that most journalists go through on a daily basis. And when you say aftermath, that's a pretty good, I think, description of the reaction from the crowd, if you will.
Yeah, and there was like a hunt. Like, one of my former colleagues from the Journal called me and said, you didn't really talk to this guy at this classified government. There was a classified government contracted company that Dorian had worked for. And he said, well, I talked to the man that you quoted, and he says he has no recollection of the conversation. And I said, well, okay, I guess we're like going to look at every single detail, but I can tell you the day we spoke, I can show you the phone records. Like, I'm happy to do that. I mean, if you're really going to say that maybe it wasn't true, then of course I'm happy to share all that. But I told him, being honest with you, you're barking up a very useless tree. I know that there's like a protest going on, but everything here was checked like 8,000 ways till Friday. So, if somebody wants to see something, I'm happy to show it to them. And the journalist was like, oh, okay, all right, my bad, and kind of backed off. But a lot of journalists wrote stories and never called me, used my name, and, but never just, part of being a journalist, you have to talk to everybody, or try to talk to everybody who you're talking about in your story. So I felt like there was a lot of that, but I think these days, none of that surprises us, right? We've all seen a lot of that lately. And I think for me, in terms of the reaction, the status part is, when you deal with a complex topic, what you're trying to do is take chaos and impose some semblance of order, take what is a lot of mythology and replace it with facts. And I think, sadly, a lot of these stories end up adding to the mythology in the end, because the debate ends up going on and on and on and doesn't really end. And so that feeling of, I want to break through all this mythology with concrete facts, it was repelled so hard that, you're like, even if I can prove these things, it sounds like no one wants to know, or no one wants to hear it. So that's a different kind of story. And it's a much more intimidating kind of story when you want to bring facts, but there are people who don't want to know those facts.
Yeah. And before we move on from this topic, what's kind of your take now on Satoshi and the importance, I guess, of finding out who is Satoshi for Bitcoin and kind of the Bitcoin community? Like, do you think that is important? And then any thoughts in terms of Dorian, somebody else, no clue? Like kind of, how do you just think about Satoshi in general now?
So I think it is important. I think it's still important to know, especially as we're moving more and more toward a digital economy. I actually think this story is important because, as you were saying, there's excitement at some of these conferences, and there's, it is exciting as we move toward a digital economy, and the key players that are bringing us there are important, whether they want to be in the open or not. I would even encourage anyone who wants to stay completely anonymous, but they still want their theories, methodology, narratives, and, way of looking at the world known. I would still think that would be worth publishing because it's shaping the world around us right now. And as for, we talked a little bit, off the record about the aftermath. Homeland Security opened an investigation as my story was coming out. I, of course, got lots of email, but I got email from one group in particular that had real information to share. And I do hope to write a follow-up story that provides a lot more information surrounding, what I reported initially. But there is so much more. And it isn't specific to just Dorian. And I think we all knew that. It was not satisfying to just focus on Dorian. There is definitely more. And I hope very much to be able to share that. I also feel like I want to respect the privacy and feelings of some of the people who've talked to me. So, I hope to be able to do that. And because I'm a journalist, I'm going to keep trying to do that. I feel I have a duty, especially after the first story, to do it.
Yeah. And then you've got a very unique perspective because going through all of the work and conversations that you did for the Newsweek story and then kind of living through the aftermath of it and the scrutiny. And then, when we connected, it was because you had recently wrote a piece in Institutional Investor about kind of crypto on Wall Street. And so, two very different types of stories, same assets, right? In terms of tracking down Satoshi Nakamoto and then talking now about kind of Wall Street hedge funds becoming very interested in this. So maybe tell us a little bit about the Institutional Investor story and kind of what you found there as you looked at crypto on Wall Street.
Yeah, and it's all related because you have, when I look at this broadly, you have the finance piece, obviously. You have the government piece, whether it's regulation or the intelligence side of things. And then you have the people using it, right? The consumers or the people who are really into Bitcoin and want to be completely unbanked, that sort of thing. So you have sort of these three, I look at it as these three big pieces, which is kind of like Bitcoin fans, the, straight-laced Wall Street people or the digital finance, wonks who are working on the infrastructure. And then this kind of regulatory intelligence government piece. And, they all really do come together. And for people who want to know, is there a piece of U.S. intelligence in this? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. And it's not a mystery that would be the case based on the technology that created Bitcoin. A lot of it harks to things that were being used by our intelligence communities. So, how that turned into an invention and then that turned into Wall Street seeing possibilities and then the government saying, oh God, we're clearly moving toward a digital economy. We need to figure out how to get around this, not around it, but get our hands around it so we can figure out how to regulate it, have some law-based sense of what's going on. And so this story really delves into like those different pressure points, how Wall Street's getting much more excited, especially with the dollar not looking so great these days. There are not that many places to flee the system. The system is pretty big now, but you have Bitcoin and it's a way to flee the system. It was one that was seen as fringe for so long, but now you have these very heavy-duty big players on Wall Street who are saying, I need to flee the dollar and anything denominated in it that might hurt me or anything that might be affected by this pandemic and actually, devalue my investments. And Bitcoin is a very, very good place to go for some of those people. But you also have the regulators in Washington. I talked to many lawyers who and people on the regulatory side who are still very down on Bitcoin. One very bright lawyer, very, very experienced, who works with the SEC, said to me, he said, well, all they're doing is swapping it for something else. So what? There's no inherent thing. It's not like a barrel of oil. It's not like a piece of paper that represents a barrel of oil. It's just a store of value that you can swap for another store of value, and that's all. And I mean, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, as we know. But there's still a real disconnect. And so this story was really talking about the genuine disconnect between well-meaning people who want to see a great digital economy, but are afraid about what will change do, what kind of risk will come with the change. And at the same time, as you know, we have Venezuela, China, and Iran who love the idea of being at the forefront of a digital economy with copycat coins that allow them to go completely outside the U.S. banking system. We've been controlling a lot of these countries and using our dollar to attack opponents when diplomacy or actual war doesn't work. Well, we can hit their bank accounts because so much is denominated, at least in part, in the US dollar. So when you talk about asymmetrical warfare, the Treasury Department can quickly come after people just through their money, and that can be very effective. So if we're going to change money, that changes our national security as well.
Yeah, and I think what's kind of eye-opening about this is that when you look at those other countries? Like the game theory here is like one of the number one questions I always get from people who are first learning about it is they say something to the effect of, well, why can't the government just ban it? Or why won't the government ban it? And I actually think that part of it is there are a lot of other countries out there that want to see the US dollar system maybe not fall, but just they don't want to be on it. Right. And so if all of a sudden there's a decentralized digital currency that they know the US is, bearish on or banning ownership of for citizens, I actually think like that might serve as a magnet for them to all go adopt it. Right. And kind of move to that system. And so the game theory almost prevents governments from stepping in and banning it. Is that kind of your take given the kind of work that you've done?
So you probably saw in my article where Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan had said, they'll ban it. They're not going to tolerate an alternative currency for long. Again, naive, because as soon as there is one and it's thriving, it's a great haven, not just for investors trying to flee the dollar, but criminals and money launderers and terrorists trying to flee the dollar so that they can do attacks without needing to rely on the dollar or anything related to the U.S. banking system. So, of course, if the U.S. could have just banned it and stuck their head in the sand, I think, any of us who weren't born yesterday, of course, they probably would have tried to do so, but they can't do so when everyone else is now adopting it or moving toward it. The only choice is to be at the forefront of it, which is part of the arguing that's going on now in Washington is how do we not fall behind, but how do we not undermine our own currency? Does this hurt our sovereignty? Does it hurt our national security? Do we understand the risk? But we also, if we take too long, someone else will develop a giant financial system around us and be participating in it, and we won't even be in that position to lead it. So it is a threat, but it's not a threat we can't deal with. We are hopefully all evidence to the contrary lately. We're hopefully going to try to stay at the forefront of other countries in the world when it comes to our banking system. Our banking system is needing a disruption. We know this. It's probably more overdue than any other sector. And I've heard people saying this now for well over a decade. So it's time.
Yeah, and it feels like the adoption by Wall Street specifically, not only one further cements kind of Bitcoin's place and cryptocurrency's place in the global system, but two is you see more and more folks. So whether it's Paul Tudor Jones, even the JP Morgans now kind of coming in and realizing, hey, we have to do something here. It really does feel like we're at a point where it's no longer the taboo subject of Wall Street. It's now, okay, what are we going to do about it? And it feels like that was kind of one of the main takeaways I got when I read the article that you wrote was just like, this is here and they know that now.
It's here and it's not going to go away. And, we honestly, our intelligence community already knows that and has known it for some time. That's why I kind of wrote a little bit about that in the story about, the working assumption is that we will be fully moved to a digital economy by 2040, and I think that might even be, it sounds like aggressive, but it probably isn't very aggressive when you really think about it. So they're already putting pieces in place quietly to try to make sure that they're ahead of the game. And at the same time, Wall Street's caught on. So I think the cat is too much out of the bag now. Somebody might hear this interview and say, oh, she's such a Bitcoin fan. I'm just being practical. I am an economics fan, but I just think that at this point, it's clear where we're going. And there are people who are going to sort of not feel comfortable. I think it's much fairer to say, I don't feel comfortable if you're someone who's still skeptical, because there is certainly all sorts of risks we've already addressed. So those are real. It's okay to not be comfortable, but that doesn't mean we can bury our head in the sand. We're probably going to have to figure it out.